All right. Let's see if I'm on this live stream. I think I'm on Facebook. Let me just check. Make sure I'm on the other channels as well. Should also be going live on LinkedIn as well as YouTube. So if you guys are watching this and you can hear me, do me a favor and just drop a comment down below. Just say hashtag live. So I know that you're watching this live. And if you guys are watching this later, watching the replay, do me a favor and drop a comment and say hashtag replay. Okay. I like to kind of get a sense for how many people are watching this live typically and how many people are watching replay. Because I also want to know if this is just a good time for people in general, because I'm typically doing these at the same time every week. So regardless, if you guys do that, okay. Brian dropped hashtag replay. So I guess Brian plans on watching this later. Sound that you guys can hear me, so let's go ahead and get started. Guys, welcome. My name's Sam Shah. I'm the founder of Wall Street Mastermind. For those of you who are new and not familiar with who I am or what we do, basically, for the past 3 years or so, we've been helping students who want to break into investment banking with the entire process. Um, Brian says that was to say I'm here. My bad. No worries, Brian. Thanks for participating regardless. So anyway, we've been helping students break into investment banking at a very, very high rate. We've worked with close to 400 students to date, and we've of the ones that are done with recruiting, we've gotten over 90% of those people into, most of the top, pretty much all the top banks out there. I think we're missing like maybe one bank out of the top 20 banks or something like that. So pretty much all the bulge bracket banks, all the elite boutique banks, we pretty much place people into. And so far, like right now, what we're doing is we're busy helping our current clients, most of them, recruit for summer 2022, because obviously those interviews are going on in real time. And yeah, seeing a lot of success this year as well. We've gotten offers from places like Evercore, Catalyst, Morgan Stanley, Tech. There's a bunch more. Citi, Houlihan Lokey, Credit Suisse, Barclays Capital, Houlihan. I think I already said Houlihan Lokey, TPH. Anyway, there's a bunch. Right, I can't remember all off the top of my head, but any bank that's already started out giving offers, we probably have someone who's gotten an offer there. So with that said, that's a little bit about us, right? What I want to talk about today, I called it the silent killer of investment banking dreams. Trying to be a little bit more dramatic to just get your guys' attention. But really what we want to talk about is it's the number one thing that after working with hundreds of students, number one thing that we've seen that is preventing people from being successful in this investment banking recruiting process. Okay. And I call it the silent killer because a lot of the times what's happening is people don't even realize that this thing is hurting them, right? People from being sorry, my volume went off. Yeah. So people don't even realize that this thing is hurting them. And so that's actually the worst part about it because, for something like the technical interviews, for example, you kind of know deep down in your heart if you're prepared or not, right? Like, you either know how to do a DCF or you don't, right? And if you don't, that's okay because then at least you know what you need to work on. You can go and work on those things and you'll be totally fine, right? But the most dangerous thing is when there's something that you're actually not good at, but also you don't realize you're not good at it. Or worse yet, a lot of times I think I see that people think they're really good at it. And then so they get frustrated when they start going through this recruiting process and they're not getting the results that they were expecting, right? Like they're expecting to get invited to a lot of interviews, but they're not getting invited, right? Or they go to these interviews that they got invited to, and they feel like the interview goes really well, but then they don't hear back from the firm, or they hear back and they usually don't move to the next round, right? And so if you're wondering like what that thing is that I'm talking about, basically it's your behavioral interviews, right? And you might be thinking like, what, the behavioral interview? Like, yeah, it's your behavioral interviews, right? Because the thing with your behavioral interviews is that unlike the technical interview, the questions are a lot more open-ended, right? They're asking you these qualitative questions, but there's no definitive answer. There's no definitive right or wrong answer, right? Like Brian, who's watching this on Facebook, he's going to have a different answer to tell me about yourself, or why do you want to do investment banking, or why do you want to work for Goldman Sachs, or any other number of questions that you could possibly get. Brian's going to have a different answer to those questions than Ryan, who's watching on YouTube. Like the answers would be totally different, right? And then there's all of you guys who are watching on LinkedIn. Like, so the point being, how do we know whose answer is right or wrong? Or, and actually there's no such thing as right or wrong, right? But whose answer is better and whose answer is worse? Because that's the key here, is that on the technical side, it's about getting to the right answer, right? There is actually a right answer, a wrong answer. If I ask you how do you do a DCF, that's pretty black or white, right? On the behavioral side, it's not about getting to the right answer. It's about coming up with an answer that's unique, that makes you stand out, that is better than your competition's answers, right? So usually what the bankers will do, or what the banks will do for these interviews, is they'll block off an entire day and they'll schedule all the candidates they want to interview for that day. And they'll do a bunch of interviews back to back to back to back to back to back, right? And then at the very end of the day, they will all get into a room, and they will, or right now, if it's COVID and it's remote, then they'll all get into a virtual conference room. But typically they'll all get into a conference room, and then they will sit around the table, and then they will discuss all the candidates that they met that day, right? And what are they doing in that discussion? They're comparing all the candidates to each other, right? And they just talk to all of them back to back to back to back. So it's actually fresh in their mind in terms of, oh, this guy had a better story than that guy because of XYZ, right? So with that in mind, if you think about the way that most people are preparing for these behavioral answers, they're actually doing it in a way that prevents them from standing out. And I'll talk about that in a second, what I mean by that. But before I go any further, just had an idea, because I think it's okay for me to describe this problem to you guys, but there's only so much you can do when you're just hearing me talk about it. I think what would be even more interesting is if any of you want me to actually like review one of your answers, like you tell me about yourself answer, for example, or walk me through your resume, right? If any of you want me to do that for you on this live stream, feel free to email your answer to me, okay? Email it to me in a Word document right now. My email is sam@wallstreetmastermind.com. It's wallstmastermind.com. So the street is abbreviated. So sam@wallstmastermind.com. So if you email it to me, subject line, just put live stream so I know what it's for. And then also include your resume, okay? Because if you want me to walk me through your resume or tell me about yourself, then I need to be able to see what's on your resume, okay? If you don't, I'm going to be sharing my screen. So if you don't want people to see who you are, make sure to delete your name, or, just put XXX or put John Smith, whatever, it doesn't really matter. If you want to block out your phone number or, personal information, feel free to do that too. But yeah, send that over. All right. So I'll wait, I'll keep talking, but I'll give it like 5 or 10 minutes while you guys are doing that. And then I'll go check my inbox And if there's anything in there, I'll pick one to look at, and we can walk through it in person. Guys, just so you know, like, um, take me up on this opportunity, I would say, because typically, like, I mean, only my paying clients um, get access to this type of help, right? Like, I don't even do this for people that are not in my program. And I mean, usually if I were to like charge an hourly rate, which I don't anymore, I don't even do hourly coaching anymore because I'm just too busy. But back when I was doing hourly coaching, like I would probably charge $500 an hour. That's how much I charge for my time, right? So this is free coaching right here. So if you guys want it, um, again, send your answer in a Word doc as well as your resume to sam@wallstreetmastermind.com, streets abbreviated, and I'll pick one to review for you guys for free on the house. Okay. So with that said, let's come back while I'm waiting for that. um, so on the behavioral side, the reason why most people struggle is because what's required is you actually have to get inside of the banker's head, right? And the worst thing you could do is, which is what most people are doing, which I was alluding to earlier, like this is the thing that makes it really hard for people to stand out on the behavioral side, is because what most people are doing nowadays is um, they're just taking like a interview guide that they got online, right? Whether it's the Wall Street Oasis guide or Breaking a Wall Street guide or whatever guide you're using, Vault guide. Hopefully you're not using the Vault guide because that guide's horrible. But um, all the most popular guides out there that everyone's using, right? You probably got some hand-me-downs from your upperclassmen. They used it when they were recruiting and they sent it to you. And in those guides, they have this list of questions, and then they tell you how to answer it, right? I think that's fine for technical questions because those answers, again, like I said, are more black and white. Although even then, there's downsides to using the guides, especially if you're just memorizing those answers. Doesn't really work very well. But on the behavioral side, especially, those guys don't work very well because by definition, they're giving you a one-size-fits-all cookie-cutter answer, right? For tell me about yourself. Oh, here's how you answer this question. You should say this, this, and this. For like, why do you want to do investment banking? Here's what you should talk about. You should say this, this, and this, right? The thing is, like I said, you're your own unique person, right? What you're trying to do is present yourself in a way that's unique and that makes you stand out and makes them want to pick you over the other people. What you're not trying to do is to have the exact same answer or at a minimum a very similar answer to everybody else, right? Because guess what? Like all of your friends are reading the same guide. So think about it. If you guys are all reading the same guides and the guide is telling you guys the exact same thing, like say this for this question, that's how you end up sounding the same as everyone else, right? And how do I know this? Because back in the days when I used to interview candidates, that's exactly what would happen. Like I said, we will interview, multiple candidates a day, right? Like 8 to 10 candidates a day, back to back to back, like 30-minute interviews, right? So if I interview like, 10 candidates, it's about 5 hours of interviews for the day, right? Sometimes we'll do more. And all of these people just sound the same. It's like they're being all fed the same answers and it's very robotic. And at that point, like as an interviewer, you kind of know what's happening, right? You're like, okay, yeah, this guy read the guides. The guy told him to say this. But then it feels like, at that point, it feels like, they're not even being genuine anymore. Right? Or you feel like the candidate's not even being genuine anymore because they're not really telling you about them. They're just telling you what they think you want to hear, right? So that's honestly the worst thing that you can do. In fact, when we interview so many students, like it's easy for all the candidates to kind of blend together when they also, like, if you don't stand out, it's like, who is that guy again? Like, I don't know. I don't really remember anything that stands out about him, and that's the worst thing that can happen, right? So that's what we want to prevent. So let's talk about how you actually prevent that for a second. Okay, so really, there's like 3 or 4 steps to this process. Okay, so the first thing is to really do well on the behaviorals, you need to know what questions to expect. Okay, like you need to know what the bankers are going to be asking you, right? This is because I'll tell you right now, like I would say over 50% of the time, based on what we've seen, when people mess up on their behavioral questions, it's because they get caught off guard by a curveball question that they weren't really expecting, right? And so if you get a curveball question that you weren't expecting, it's actually kind of hard to make up an entire story on the spot, you know? Like if they say, hey, tell me about a time when you had to work with someone that's really difficult, let's just say, I'm just making it up, right? If you didn't already have an example prepared for that, it's going to be hard to come up, not just come up with an example, but also like organize your thoughts and tell it in a coherent way, right? Now, that's what you pretty much have to do in the interview though, right? So if you can't do that, or if you're being put on the spot and then you start stuttering, you're like and a lot of ums and ahs, and you don't sound confident because you're trying to improvise, right? Most of us aren't very good impromptu speakers, right? Some of us, very few, there are people out there that can just go off the cuff and still be super smooth and whatnot. But 9 out of 10 times, I think that's probably not the case. So that's why the most important thing first is knowing exactly what the bankers are going to ask you, and knowing exactly what to expect. It's like walking to a final exam, already knowing what questions are going to be on the test, right? So that's the first thing. Okay. Once you know that, though, the second thing is still on the same note, like getting inside the banker's head, knowing what the bankers want to hear when it comes to each of these questions, right? Because the reason why, going back to what I said in the beginning, a lot of people don't realize that they're actually not very good at answering behavioral questions. Like they think they are when they're not, is because in their mind, based on their standards, based on what they think makes up a good answer, they think the answers are already pretty good. In fact, whatever answers you come up with for your behavioral answers, presumably you're taking your best shot at it, right? It's your best attempt, right? It wouldn't be your answer otherwise. It wouldn't be your answer if it wasn't your best. Like no one says, oh, I'm going to just hold back and not give my best answer. Like there's no reason to do that, right? And so typically when someone messes up, it's because there's a misalignment between what they think is a good answer versus what the banker thinks is a good answer. And unfortunately, you're not the one who's going to be judging the quality of the answer, or like, in other words, your opinion doesn't really matter in this case. It's what the banker thinks that really matters, right? So you need to be able to get inside the banker's head and know what it is that they're looking for. Well, how do you do that? Well, we like to say, like when we work with our clients, like all the important decisions that you make, and it needs to be data driven, right? We can't be emotional about it, or we don't want to have knee-jerk reactions like, oh, this answer didn't work this one time, so it must be a bad answer. Like sometimes you might just run into an interviewer who's had a bad day, woke up on the wrong side of bed, like, or maybe you and them just don't click or whatever, right? That's a sample size of one, right? What you want to make decisions off of is a large sample size of data. So for example, how do we do that? Like inside of our program, the way that we show our students how to answer these questions is first of all, we've interviewed a bunch of students ourselves, right? So we have that data. But more importantly, the even better data that we have is, like I said, we've worked with over 350, close to 400 students at this point in the last 3 years or so, right? We've also seen exactly what they said for each of these questions that they're trying to answer, because we were the ones who helped them with those answers. Like, we actually literally help our clients write their answers. Like, not, we don't write it for them, but they write it, and then like we help them edit it, right? So we're writing it with them. So we see everybody's answers. We've also seen the results. Like, we see who ended up with what offers or how many offers, right? What type of banks, right? Oh, this person went to Goldman Sachs, that person went to Morgan Stanley, this person went to JP Morgan, Evercore, Centerview, Catalyst, PJT, whatever, right? So based on that, we're then able to do some side-by-side comparisons of all these answers for the students that have been the most successful, for the students that have gotten into the toughest banks, right? And we can compare and contrast and say, hey, what are the commonalities between all the most successful students and their answers, right? That's just basic pattern recognition, right? And then based on that, we've identified certain elements, and it's what the elements are is different depending on the question that's being asked, right? But we've identified different elements for each question, and success leaves clues, right? So that tells us, okay, these are the things that work most, if not all of the time. Like, these are the things that tells us these are the things that the bankers are looking for, right? So that's a data-driven approach. It's different than, say, some guy who's been a banker for 2 years, then came out and decided to start their own business, and then their business is, they're going to write an interview guide, and the interview guide is pretty much just one man's opinion on, how these questions should be answered, right? But how do we know that that person is right? It's just like, that's probably what they did back when they interviewed and it worked for them. Doesn't necessarily mean it's going to work for you, because you're a different person, right? So whatever you're doing, I mean, not even just interview guys, but like, or, if you go and ask an upperclassman for their opinion, they might give you their opinion on an answer that you have. But again, that's just one person's opinion, right? So that's not very scientific, right? That's very subjective. For something as subjective as behavioral questions, you want to make sure as much as possible you're making decisions off of real data, off of a large sample size, and off of good, like, high quality data, right? So that's the second step. Know what the bankers are looking for, so that you can then tailor the answers based on that, right? You're not going to lie, but you're going to take what you've done in the past, take all the examples that you have, and you're going to package it together in a way that includes those elements that the bankers are looking for, right? So that's the second step. Then what's the third step? By the way, I just checked my inbox. Don't see any submissions from you guys. So that's cool. If you guys don't have any submissions, then, we won't go over a live example, because I guess everyone's shy or something. I don't know. Again, like I said, look, typically, if I were to charge you on an hourly basis and do this, I'll probably charge $500 an hour. So this is on the house. If you guys want free edits to your behavioral answers, I will send it over now. I'll do one on, tell me about yourself, or walk me through your resume or whatever, right? Just make sure you include your resume so that I can actually edit it and send it over in a Word doc, okay? sam@wallstmastermind.com. I'll check again in a few minutes. If there's still no submissions, we just won't do one. That's okay. It's not a big deal. So let's see. So, okay. So the third step is, and okay, I just got a submission, but let's see here. Is this just the resume, or is this the answer also? Okay, this is just a resume. Hey, man, the person that just sent this, I won't say your name because I know you don't want your identity revealed. Do you have, like, your actual answer written out for tell me about yourself or walk me through your resume? Because that's what I would be editing. I'm not here to, not on this call anyway, I'm not here to edit your actual resume. So I know you sent me your resume, which is cool, but if you want to send me your actual answer for tell me about yourself or walk me through your resume, I'm happy to look at that. Okay, so why don't you follow up with another email with that? And I'm gonna keep going here. So anyway, we talked about the first two steps, right? Then there's the third step. If you know what questions to expect, You know what the bankers are looking for or what they want to hear for these answers. The third step is then you're going to go and write out your answers, right? And you're going to do the best that you can based on what you know the bankers are looking for already. And then once you have that, though, the third step, which most people skip, is you need to be able to benchmark yourself against the competition. Okay. Because a lot of people, what they're doing now is they come up with their behavioral answers and then they will just, once they have the answers, they're like, okay, these are my answers. This is what I'm going with, right? I'm going to now practice these answers, rehearse them as many times as possible, memorize it, whatever. And then when the interview time comes, I'm just going to use these answers. Well, the problem with that is, going back to what I said earlier, what's really happening is you're being graded on a curve. You're being graded on a relative basis. You guys have probably all taken classes that were graded on a curve before, right? What does that mean? It means you're not being graded on an absolute basis. It's not just what score did you get on the test. You're being graded on a relative basis, relative to your classmates, right? Like in every single class, like out of a class of 50 people, only the professors decided only 10 people can get A's, right? The next 10 people get B's. The next 10 people get C's, so on and so forth, right? And so that's kind of how it's working with the behavioral interview, is that the interviewers, they only have so many spots, that they so many offers they can give out. So they're grading all of you on a curve and they're trying to figure out who is the best, right? Who's in the top 1 to 3% of our applicant pool. Like that's the average acceptance rate each year at most of these top banks, like the Bulge Bracket and Elite Boutique banks, right? So most people, though, they have no idea what their competition is doing or how their competition is actually answering these questions, right? And so they just assume that, okay, I have my answer, it's good enough. But a lot of times, like if you don't know whether your competition's or how your competition is answering these questions, their answers could be better than yours. Their answers could be worse than yours. The point is you have no idea, right? Like out of 10 candidates that are going for the same job, where do you stack up relative to the other 9 people? Are you 8 out of 10, 5 out of 10, 3 out of 10, 7 out of 10? Like, where are you? Right? It's important to know that, right? And so the way we do that with our clients is because we have such a huge community of clients. First of all, like a lot of times, like we're on these behavioral, we have what's called like a behavioral office hours where we're actually breaking down these answers live. We're breaking down different people's answers live on the spot in a group setting, right? And then so you can actually see how other people are answering these questions, and then you can also see the feedback that we're giving in terms of what they could be doing better. And a lot of times you can take that and apply it to your own answers, right? But it's kind of like what I'm offering you guys to do on this call is like break down one of your answers. So the other thing though is like, for example, we have a client, his name is Bradley, okay? And Bradley has a pretty amazing story where he basically applied and got interviews from every single Bulge Bracket and Elite Boutique bank. He also passed every single first round interview. So he got invited back to every single super day. And then he went to the first 4 super days that he got invited to. He got all 4 offers, and then he canceled the rest of his super days because he didn't need to go anymore. Because at that point, he was picking between offers from Goldman Sachs, Evercore, let's say like Citi and Perella Weinberg, right? And basically Goldman Sachs and Evercore, like those were his 2 top choices. And so he ended up choosing Evercore, which is an awesome firm. But the point is, we saw the results that he was getting. And it was like, wow, this guy not only got every single interview, which by the way, means he networked really well. And by the way, we haven't talked about networking, but in order to network really well, guess what you need? You need to have really good behavioral answers, because in those networking conversations, they're still going to be asking you some behavioral questions like, hey, tell me about yourself. Why do you want to do banking? So on and so forth, right? So he got every single interview that he applied for because he had referrals at every single bank. And then also he passed every single interview he actually went to, right? Whether it was a first round or a super day, he advanced to either the next round or the offer every single time. So that's very, very rare. You don't typically see that. Like having worked with hundreds of students, like we very, very rarely see students do that. And so we saw that and we said, holy crap, Bradley, like that's amazing. You whatever you're doing is clearly working. right? So what we asked him to do is like, hey, after he signed all his offers, we actually did a mock interview with him, not like to prep him for the interviews, but actually to prep the rest of our clients for their interviews. Because what we said is, hey, Bradley, we want to see how you're answering these questions, what you've been doing in these interviews, so that we can provide an example, like basically the gold standard to the rest of our clients that we're working with, right? Like on that curve that we talked about on a scale of 1 to 10, if there were 10 people all going for the same job, Bradley would be a 10 out of 10, clearly, right? And so why is that important? Because now we have a measuring stick, right? Now we have something that we can, that all of our other clients can benchmark themselves against. Like if you're wondering, hey, what does my competition out there sound like? Well, you don't need to know what every single person sounds like. Obviously, that's not possible. But hey, like your toughest competition, the highest caliber, the best of the best out there, here's an example of what they sound like. So now you at least, like, it's like an hour-long mock interview. You listen to this mock interview and you're like, okay, now I can actually visualize what my toughest competition sounds like in these interviews. And then now you can actually say, well, based on that and based on what I know about my own answers, not just the content of my answers, but also how I deliver my answers, like what is the gap between where I'm at and where Bradley's at, right? Like if he's a 10, if I know he's a 10 already, what does that make me? Maybe I'm a 7, maybe I'm a 5, maybe I'm a whatever, right? Whatever you think. And then, so that's the third step. But now at least you've identified the gap. You don't identify the gap first, you can't close the gap, right? Now that you've identified the gap, then the fourth and final step is, okay, now we got to work on improving your answers to close that gap, right? How do we get you to be as close to Bo as possible, the Bradley as possible? And I'm not even saying you have to get to exactly where he's at, because like I said, not everyone is going to get every single interview and every single offer that they apply for, right? But you don't need to. All you really need is one offer, right? Like most people will be really happy if they just get one offer. They just want to get into the industry and work at a bank, right? Like a good bank, obviously, but any good bank is fine with them, right? And so if Bo's a 10 or Bradley's a 10, you don't have to get to a 10. You could get to a 9, you could get to an 8. You'd probably still be good enough to get at least one of these offers, right? So then we work on improving your answers. And how do you do that? Well, you can't be the one to critique your own answers, right? You can't be the one to come up with the edits yourself, because at the end of the day, like I said earlier, you're already putting your best foot forward, right? You already try to come up with your best answers in the first place. It's not like you're holding back, right? It's not like you have an ace up the sleeve that you're not using, right? And so usually if there's some improvements that can be made to your answers, you're not going to be the one to identify that on your own, right? You might be able to come up with like minor refinements around the edges, like, oh, I changed this little thing here, this little thing there, but like those aren't the things that are really going to move the needle, right? So for that last step, what you need ideally is for someone who's actually worked in banking, but also not only that, someone who's interviewed a lot of candidates. So again, they have that knowledge base, that experience, right? That large sample size of data to go off of. And then you want them to go through each of your answers line by line and edit every sentence for you and fully optimize it so that it can sound as good as possible. And going to that, back to that point of like getting inside the banker's head, well, this is a banker who's doing that for you. And so obviously that's the best way to get inside a banker's head, right? Now the problem with that is like most bankers out there are just not going to do that for you, right? Bankers are working 80, 90, 100 hours a week, especially nowadays. I mean, you guys are all reading in the news about how busy people are. There's all these SPACs going on. They don't have enough analysts and associates and people working at these banks. Not to mention the more senior people. I mean, the more senior folks, like they have families, they got to go home to their wives, their kids. Like nobody wants to sit there and spend hours and hours rewriting your answers for you. I mean, unless like, they're your family member or they're related to you, like your dad's a banker, your mom's a banker, like maybe they'd be willing to do that. But otherwise, like most of the time, even if you try to go get advice from an actual banker, it'd be over like a 20 to 30 minute phone conversation where they just give you like some very high level feedback on the spot, right? But that's not very in depth. That's not in detail, right? And so that's where we come into the picture. Like a lot of our students, they come to us because they actually want that level of feedback where we're going through everything with them line by line, optimizing all their sentences, basing these changes off of the large sample size of data that we have that I talked about back in step 2, right? Which is we've compared and contrasted all the most successful answers that we've seen out of hundreds of clients, right? And making those data-driven decisions. And at the end of that, once we feel like the answers are perfected, then you go and rehearse with those answers, and then we practice, right? Then we do the mock interviews, right? Then we nail down the content, and then we work on the delivery, which is arguably just as important, if not more important than the content, because you're going to have to like, it's not just what you say, it's how you say it, right? So that's kind of the gist of the 4-step process. Okay, so I just checked my email. It looks like I did get a submission here. So I have a little bit of time left here. So let's pause here on the 4-step process, and let me try and go through this answer real quick. Let me just put it on screen. Just to tell me about yourself. Okay. All right. So let me share my screen with you guys real quick so you can actually see it. Okay. So here's the resume on the left, and then here's the answer that I got. Okay. So I currently, let's read through this together first. So I currently have 2 years of experience managing mutual fund changes. Any change to a mutual fund goes to the board of trustees over the funds. We manage those changes as product managers between the investment team, legal, compliance, and other departments to ensure successful proposal, providing analysis of impact to mutual fund shareholders and our fund advisor. Prior to this, I worked in the insurance industry during college, matching price to risk level. I also was fortunate in college to take classes that managed both an equity and fixed income fund. For the equity fund, I followed and wrote investment recommendations for Disney, NVIDIA, and Intel. This exposure to equity analysis and learning about investment banking has led to my desire to transfer into investment banking. Adding to this interest, I have exposure from my current role to senior loans and CLOs through a mentorship, and seek to learn as much as I can about the industry. Okay, so let me pause here for a second. So for those of you that are still on this live stream right now, I want to do a little experiment, right? Let's say, like, now that you've seen this answer, if you were to rate this answer on a scale of 1 to 10, what would you say this answer is? Like, how high would you rate this answer? Like, what is the score that you would assign this? Again, keep in mind, we're doing this on a relative basis. Like, if we're doing this on a curve, if there were 10 candidates going for these investment banking jobs, where do you think this guy's answer would be on that curve? If you drop a number down below in the comments, I just want to kind of get a sense for like what you guys think, because maybe you guys think this answer is really, really good. Maybe you guys think this answer is horrible. Maybe you guys think this answer is about average. I'm curious to see what you guys think before I give my feedback and give you guys my opinion. Okay, so why don't you guys drop your comments down below, and then I'm going to take a sip of water while I wait for you guys to do that. Anybody? You guys got to participate, guys. You guys are going to sit on this live training. You got to participate or you're not going to get much out of this. Drop the score down below for what you guys think this guy's answer is. Like, scale 1 to 10, 10 being the best, 1 being the worst. What do you guys think about this guy's answer? Or how good do you think it actually is? Okay. I guess you guys are all super shy or something. I see 3 people on Facebook, 4 people on LinkedIn. No one's responding. Okay. No one has an answer. Oh, Ryan, average 7.5. Okay. Thank you, Ryan, for at least participating. So I'm not just talking to myself. So Ryan thinks it's 7.5. He says it's average. Okay. So 7.5 sounds above average, right? I mean, out of 10 people, 7.5 means you're better than 7 out of the 10 people, right? But okay, 7.5. Anyone else want to kind of take a guess at what you think of this answer? Okay. It's fine. Let's go with 7.5. So here's what I think, right? I think the good thing is this person actually has some finance experience both throughout college and also now that he's graduated and he's been working for looks like the last 2 to 3 years, right? And so the good thing is there's a lot of material that he can work with, right? But I think the bad thing about this answer, I actually wouldn't rate this as high as a 7.5, to be honest. The bad thing about this answer is that it's just reading. It's almost just like reading his resume from top to bottom, right? He started from his most recent experience. Actually, I should put his resume back on the screen so you guys can see it. So he started from his most recent experience, which is his mutual fund analyst experience. He talked about that, right? And that was this is the biggest paragraph in his answer because he spent the most time talking about this, probably because it's the most substantial experience, right? Then he spent 1 sentence on his previous job before that. Then he talked about the equity and fixed income fund that he was a part of back in college, which I guess is this, right? And then he added something about this mentorship, which I'm not sure which that is from. So that's like, this is a common mistake that we see actually with people who try to answer tell me about yourself or walk me through your resume, is that it just turns into them reading off their resume, right? What they're actually asking for here is not, hey, tell me what is on your resume. Even when they say walk me through your resume, what they're not asking for is, hey, just like itemize all the things on your resume for me. Tell me what you've done before, because they have your resume in front of them already, right? Like they can see exactly what you've done. They can see you worked at this mutual fund. Then they can see that you worked at an insurance company before that, right? And they can see that you've been in these student organizations. They don't need you to just tell them what they can already see. What they're asking for in this answer is like all the commentary that's missing, all the voiceover that they can't glean just from reading a resume. Because if all they needed to do was read your resume and then they don't even need to interview you, right? Then they can just go off of your resume and decide who they want to hire and who they don't want to hire. What they want to know is why have you made the decisions you made up to this point? Why did you choose to go through these experiences? Why did you join these clubs specifically and not other clubs? Why did you choose to take this insurance job? And then after that, like, why did you choose to, go into this mutual fund industry? And then now you're saying you want to do investment banking. Like, what I would want to know too is like why you didn't just go into investment banking in the first place, right? So there's a lot of think about it this way. It's like instead of the what, because they already see the what, it's already on your resume. They want to know the why, and they want to know the how, right? So if you're not explaining why you're doing this or why you've done the things that you've done, then it's not really going to be adding a whole lot of value, right? So I think that's the first thing, that's the biggest thing. But also the second thing is Typically, when you tell these stories, though, you want to tell these stories. Oh man, and it looks like my live stream just cut off in my Facebook group for some reason. So, um, if you guys are watching in the Facebook group and you want to continue watching, I guess you'll have to go and watch this on LinkedIn or on YouTube. Okay, but regardless, coming back to what I was saying, the other thing about this answer that you really want to change is right now you're going through this in reverse chronological order, as in you're talking about the most recent thing first and then working your way back, right, to things you've done in the past, because this is how it's sequenced in your resume, right? What you actually want to do when you're telling your story is you want to tell it in a chronological order. And so you want to start from the beginning and then work your way to the present. Because again, what the banker is looking for is they want to see the progression of how you started and then why did you make the decisions that you made along the way to get from point A to point B, from point B to point C, from point C to point D, from point D to point E. So it's hard to do that when you're going backwards, right? So you gotta go forward. And again, don't just itemize everything. So it's not as simple as just saying, hey, so back in college, I was in an equity and fixed income fund. And also like from there, I did an insurance, internship. And then after that, I graduated and I went to work at a mutual fund. Like if you just do that, you're still just itemizing everything, which is really not adding anything to what I already know. Right. What you need is you need to add some of the what I call like that connective tissue. Okay, the connective tissue between each of these experiences, the transition stuff that shows like why you went from here to here, right? And then why did you go from here to here? Like what was the thought process? What was the rationale, right? And then why are you trying to go from here now? If you're already working on a mutual fund, why are you trying to go from here to into investment banking, right? Like I think you said this exposure to equity analysis and learning more about investment should be led to my desire to transfer into investment banking. The thing is like this also doesn't really make sense because you're saying right here you're talking about your fixed income fund and your equity fund experience from back in college, and you're saying it sounds like you're saying that's the exposure that caused you to want to go into banking, but then you were doing this back in college. So then the question becomes like, well, then why didn't you just go straight into banking out of college, right? Why did you go into a mutual fund instead? Because presumably, like the natural assumption, like without anything being said, what the banker is going to assume is that okay, so this guy was interested in banking back in college, but he just probably couldn't get into banking then, and then so that's why he settled for a mutual fund, which is, you know, not as hard to get into, right? Like objectively speaking, it's not as hard to get into versus banking. But like if they read between the lines and that's a conclusion, or that's the assumption that they're making, then the chances of you advancing to the next round is going to be pretty low, right? Because what you're signaling there is I did try to go into banking back when I was in college, but I wasn't qualified or I wasn't good enough to make the cut. And if you weren't good enough to make the cut back then, like why should we give you a chance now? Right? That's what they're going to be thinking, right? Especially if you already graduated. Most banks they want to hire people who are still in school or who are just about to graduate, right? If once you graduated, like the longer you've been graduated, the harder it is going to be for you to move into banking. Like you're more of a not you're not like the typical candidate anymore, right? I'm not saying you can't get hired, you still can, but just the bar is higher and it's a lot harder, right? So you have to address the elephant in the room, which is like, okay, if you've been interested in banking since back in college, like why didn't you just go straight into that? Or otherwise, you want to avoid implying that you've been interested ever since college. You know, it has to be something that's more recent, something happened more recently, maybe in your current job that caused you to want to go into investment banking. That would be probably the easier explanation, right? So those are probably like the major areas that I would personally want to improve about this. And then there's other smaller things around the edges. Like all you've done here is like talk about the things on your resume, but usually like we'll touch lightly on like a little bit of like some of the personal stuff too, right? Like, hey, here's where I'm from, here's where I grew up. You know, this like maybe a unique personal identifier or something interesting about you that's going to make you memorable amongst all the people that they're interviewing that day. And then like, you know, maybe even talk about, you know, why you chose to go to your school or why you're studying the things you're studying. Although you're graduated, so maybe that's why there's less of an emphasis on that. But basically, like I said, I'm starting from the beginning of my life and working my way through to everything else, with the caveat that you don't want to spend too much time on the first 18 years or so of your life, which is touching on that part lightly. I'm focusing most of the answer on what's happened since I've been in college and beyond. Okay, so anyway, that's some high level feedback for you, okay, to the person who submitted this. Um, I don't have time to like rewrite your answers for you here, and also like we wouldn't be able to do that because we would have to be like on the call together and talking. But that's what we would typically do for our clients, right? But hopefully this still helps you. So that's basically just an example for you guys. Like, look, and if you ask me to score this answer myself, I would probably give this like on a scale of 1 to 10, I'd probably give this like a 5 or maybe even slightly lower. Okay, so that just like I don't know, whatever you guys, a lot of you guys like weren't didn't really drop your score down in the comments, but you'll want to like see like, hey, what did you think this score was compared to what I thought the score was? And obviously, I'm a lot more experienced than you guys are, and then so that also gives you a sense for like, hey, how accurately am I assessing the quality of these answers? Because a lot of times, like if you're not good at assessing the quality of these answers, like then that's where you're going to get into trouble, right? A lot of people what tends to happen is they overestimate how good their answers actually are. Okay, so anyway, hopefully that helps you guys. If anyone has questions, let's open it up for questions. I can stay on for a little bit longer. I want to make sure I answer any questions you guys might have. Can be about behaviorals, can be about the other stuff, anything that's recruiting related. I'm happy to answer it. So if you have any questions, start dropping those questions down below in the comments. Okay. While we're waiting for that, um, just I'll do like a quick little commercial break. So for those of you who joined late and don't know what we're about, again, like I'm the founder of Wall Street Mastermind, and what we do is we help students like you break into investment banking, right? And we have an over 90% success rate. We worked with close to 400 students at this point over the last 3 years. It's a pretty large sample size. So, you know, we figured out just exactly how this process works and what needs to be done to virtually guarantee that as long as you do the work, you're going to break into this industry, right? Nothing's ever guaranteed 100% in life, but I think this is as close as it gets, right? And so today we talked about the behaviorals, and that's really just one of the many things that we help our clients with, but we also help our clients build up their resume. We help them go out and find the internships that they need, even if they have no relevant experience whatsoever, right? Like sometimes like getting that very first internship is the hardest, right? So we help our clients with that. We help them with their resume, their cover letter, their LinkedIn profile. We teach them how to network with bankers to get the maximum number of referrals that they can get so they can get more interviews. We help them with the behavioral interviews, obviously. You guys already saw that today. And we teach our clients all the technicals that they need to know, right? And so basically, if you have all of those things and you're able to learn all of those things in the shortest amount of time possible, just because of how accelerated the recruiting timeline is nowadays, like most of you are having to recruit by the time you're halfway through sophomore year, right? Like the sophomores that are currently sophomores, they're going through recruiting right now as we speak. In fact, a lot of offers have already gone out, right? And so most people have very little time on top of their schoolwork, on top of everything else they have going on in life, to not only have to maintain a good GPA, but also do internships, join clubs, take on leadership positions, network with hundreds of bankers, prep for the interviews. Like it's just a lot to manage. And so where we come in is we take all the trial and error out of the process. We take all the guesswork out of it. You're not having to like self-study or teach yourself something you don't understand, which takes a really long time. You're not having to figure out where to go find answers every time you have a question to every little thing, right? You just have one definitive go-to source that knows exactly what the best answer is, and can help you get the results that you want the fastest. Does not mean that you don't have to do the work, by the way. Still gonna have to work very hard, okay? Nothing's gonna be handed to you, but it just means that your work is gonna be a lot more efficient and it's gonna be a lot more effective. Like for the same amount of work that you're gonna be putting in, because you are going to work your butt off, your work is not going to go to waste, right? You want to make sure that you're doing it for a good reason, right? And you want to make sure you're not doing the wrong things, right? So that's kind of what we do. If that's something that you guys feel like you're interested in, feel free to reach out to our team, schedule a free strategy session. You can do so at www.wallstreetmastermind.com/apply. In fact, I think I dropped the link in the description of this live stream already, so you can just go through that link and book a call with us. And it's a completely free call. We just on this call, we just learn more about your recruiting situation. What are your goals? What are you trying to accomplish? What kind of banks are you trying to get into? What do you currently need help with? And then, like, depending on what you tell us, we'll figure out if or how we can help you and what that might look like. And if we can, we'll walk you through exactly what we would do, and you can decide if it's for you or not. Right. So everything we do with every single client is customized based on their needs. We don't take a one size fits all approach, which is honestly the reason why we have such a high success rate, right? It's really what differentiates us from all the other services that are out there. Most of them are not personalized, not customized. They're one size fits all, and doesn't really work for most people, right? So anyway, that's my little spiel. I don't know if anyone has any questions. I was trying to buy you guys some time to drop your comments or drop your questions down below in the comments, but I don't really see any questions. So if you guys don't have questions, then we can actually wrap it up here. If you guys have questions, I'm gonna do a last call. Now would be the time to speak up. Speak now or forever hold your peace. Just kidding. I'll be back next week. So if you guys have questions then, you can bring it then as well. But if you guys don't have any questions, then we can wrap it up here. And hopefully you guys found this to be helpful. And we'll be back next week talking about a completely different topic. Okay? So make sure you tune in again. Thanks, guys. And have a great evening. All right. Bye.